Leonardo DiCaprio.
Miss Anne Hathaway.
Meryl Streep, the Iron Lady.
Alan Arkin in Little Miss Sunshine.
Kevin Costner.
The King's Speech.
Birdman.
I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Redoing the Oscars. And this week we're going to be looking at the year 2006. We've been going back every single year since 2015, every single week going back, talking about one of those major categories, whether it be Best Picture or Director or one of those top 4 acting categories, and picking an alternative nominated pick, someone who was nominated that I think probably should have won over the eventual winner. Also picking a person that wasn't nominated at all that maybe definitely should have got nominated or even won. And then ultimately trying to figure out, did the Academy make the right decision? Am I choosing this week as a thought exercise, kind of like how I did last week? Or do I genuinely think that this person should have won and we are kind of redoing and righting the wrongs? Is it personal taste or is it correcting the course of history based on the general feedback of the film? That's what we try to answer at the end of these episodes. I've been having a lot of fun with them. You guys have been commenting below, letting me know what your picks would have been. Please feel free to continue to do that. Don't have to write up some big long thing. You can just let me know what your picks would have been as well. Love to hear that in the comments down below. And I love making these videos and sharing my thoughts because they're helpful exercises of trying to understand the Oscars at the time and what would have happened had things gone differently, while also giving you a bit of a glimpse into my own personal taste for the movies of these years. But without further ado, let's jump into things. We always like to start off with a bit of context at the top, so let's get into the 2006 Oscars context. Where were we? What Oscars was this? And this was, in my mind, the Scorsese Oscars. This was the year that he won Best Director and Best Picture for The Departed, and it was a long time coming. Not only had he made multiple Best Picture movies that were nominated for Best Picture in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. In the 2000s, there was kind of an effort in the early 2000s with Gangs of New York and Miramax to try to finally get Scorsese's Oscar. That didn't really work. Then it was The Aviator, another big, expensive period piece, kind of more that serious type of an Oscar movie that they would think that the Academy would like to appreciate. He doesn't get it. Then at a certain point, it became kind of this narrative. The fact that he's one of the greatest living filmmakers and he had never won Best Picture or Best Director, it became kind of this thing. So it was kind of ironic that in 2006 he wins for The Departed, a crime movie that I don't think was positioned as a big prestige movie. They've been trying to do that with Kundun, I would argue, and then even Gangs of New York or Aviator in the 2000s period, and it wasn't really working. And how ironic that eventually the Academy gives the Oscar to them for not the serious kind of a period movie, but gives it to Scorsese for the kind of classic Scorsese movie, which is the gangster epic, the fun, entertaining kind of a popcorn movie. And when I take a look at the Best Picture lineup, I actually think that they made the correct choice, and The Departed was the best film of the lineup. Of course, it's connected to a great filmmaker, and it has that legacy of being the movie that he finally won for. It's not my favorite of his movies. I still like some of his other crime movies more, like a Casino or Goodfellas or even Mean Streets. But I am glad, and I know that he won, and I know that a lot of people do really well appreciate this movie and rewatch it quite a bit. So especially looking at the lineup as well, which isn't my favorite year, and this isn't my favorite year of Oscars. It's one of my least favorite, I think, particularly of the 21st century, where you have Peter Morgan, where he gets nominated for the Queen. I mean, I know he just wrote the film, but it's very much his DNA, and his best work is The Crown. So I don't think The Queen is his defining work. You think of Letters from Iwo Jima, which is a movie I love, but definitely not Clint Eastwood's defining movie. Same thing with Babel, Inarritu. That's not his defining movie, and he wins eventually for Birdman a few years later, so all good there. And then the other arguable movie would be maybe something like Little Miss Sunshine, but those directors haven't gone on to make that many more kind of all-star amazing films, and it is very indicative of its time, the kind of cutesy Sundance kind of a movie. Now, Coda won in 2020, so I think that type of a movie is still always relevant, the Sundance kind of a heart-warmer, feel-good movie. But those movies don't always stand the test of time and are connected to like established auteurs like a Martin Scorsese. So for the Best Picture category, I think the Academy got it right. And some of the acting categories, though, I think I could have done an episode on each one of the acting categories. There isn't like last week, a Javier Bardem or Daniel Day-Lewis, where it's like a defining role for a great actor. Forrest Whitaker, I'm glad he has an Oscar for Last King of Scotland because that performance is good, but it's definitely a supporting acting category when he would have been definitely campaigned in that if that performance in that movie came out today. It's really James McAvoy's movie, so kind of an odd win in that sense. Jennifer Hudson for Dreamgirls, while very good in the movie hasn't stood the test of time, and neither has her movie star career. And then in Best Actress, Helen Mirren, another actor I'm glad that she has an Oscar, but not necessarily one I think is going to be the most defining role of her career. Maybe, kind of, but that's got somewhat of a forgotten movie, and maybe just some people like it and I just don't like this year generally. But I thought about going with some of the other acting categories, and I just couldn't find another alternative that was also nominated that I would have gone with, unlike the Best Supporting Actor category, which is why we're talking about it today. So jumping into things, my alternative nominated pick for Best Supporting Actor in the 2006 Oscars would have been Mark Wahlberg in The Departed. This is a performance I absolutely love, and it's not necessarily to knock an Alan Alda in Little Miss Sunshine. He's not even the least favorite of all these kind of performances. Like I mentioned, it's just because I thought there was a couple of good options here that were nominated that I probably would have gone over instead, and we'll talk about if the Academy ultimately got it right. But my preference, at least, would be Mark Wahlberg here, and I know that he's an actor that probably hasn't made a capital G great movie in the last 15 years. His career has been a little bit more disappointing, particularly in the streaming era, where he's making a lot of these action comedy movies that I guess are technically seen by a lot of people on Netflix, but haven't kind of resonated in the general culture in terms of an important movie that's remembered for a long time. But when he's on his game, he is an absolutely great performer. And in this period of, let's say, 2006 to 2016, he did a lot of great and interesting movies and is in and working with a lot of great and interesting directors like Martin Scorsese here. And he is the perfect actor for this character. I think he deeply understands this kind of Boston wise-ass kind of a guy and absolutely nails every element of the character. And what I love about it also is that it is a true supporting performance. Every time he shows up in the movie, which is not that much, but every time he shows up, he gives it a sense of energy and liveliness, where he'll show up, deliver some kind of funny, witty lines in a perfect way possible, and then kind of exit the scene before, without spoiling anything in case you haven't seen the movie, kind of showing up near the end and being an important part of that finale. But what I think he does so great as a performer in this role is kind of taking already sharp, funny lines and grounding them in a sense of reality and a sense of pace and delivery, while also understanding kind of the themes and underlying motivations of why that character would be saying things. It's one thing to be an actor and say a really funny line. A lot of these are just really funny lines. It's another to, I think, elevate it and bring that sense of energy. So the first part is just the speed of the way he says things. He gets these lines off very quickly. It makes him, as a character, seem very intelligent, very quick-witted, so that when the scenarios of the plot happen later on, they're much more believable, because even though he's doing these kind of wise-ass lines that are kind of demeaning and insulting, they come out very quickly. They're very sharp in their rhythm. So you understand this is a guy who can come up with a comeback very quickly. He's very intelligent and he can process things very well. And some of that is just the fact that he can deliver these lines very quickly in a very kind of rat-tat way, very screwball-esque, and makes it very funny. What I also think he's great at is the jealousy innate to this role, the kind of suspicious jealousy that is going on within the entire film. He is the kind of number two. I think he kind of wishes he could be undercover. He's always suspicious. When we ever see like a wide shot of him and Alec Baldwin, he is gritting his teeth. He is just looking like he's about to explode, but holding that all in and always eyeing down people and never giving them the benefit of the doubt. So you're always kind of keeping an eye on him in the frame, even though he's not necessarily saying anything. A lot of that has to do with just the tightness of how he holds his body. Like I mentioned, those kind of grimacing looks that he'll give with the kind of furrowed eyebrows that Wahlberg brings. He understands the kind of anger and jealousy that this character has. It just happens to be used for comedic effect within the movie, but is very understanding of that. So he's not in a lot of the movie, but every time I watch it, his parts are some of my favorites. If you want, just check out a YouTube compilation of all of his best parts in the film. It's a great watch and a reminder of when Wahlberg's on his game and is committed to the performance. Not only can he be deadly funny like he is in this film, but he can also kind of understand the character very deeply. And I think he's excellent in the film. And I think, even though it's kind of Mark Wahlberg, and it would be weird to say the Academy Award winning Mark Wahlberg is in the latest film Balls Up. But, if I were to give my favorite performance of the nominated movies in this year, I think it would be Mark Wahlberg. But if we're talking about maybe my own personal winner, my favorite performance in the supporting category that wasn't even nominated, probably wasn't even considered, my alternative unnominated pick, that would be Bill Nighy in Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. This is, if you don't know, he plays a character called Davy Jones, the captain of the Flying Dutchman, a kind of villainous, haunted figure because he is a heartbroken man who quite literally has his heart separated from his body and inside of a chest, which is the sort of MacGuffin for the second and third films. And oh, by the way, he is a half man, half octopus hybrid, in which the CGI is incredibly impressive. And what I think is so amazing about this performance is in part that it didn't necessarily need this great of a performance. The CGI and the characterization and the rest of the movie is already so great that you didn't necessarily need Bill Nighy to be kind of delivering this incredible performance within this movie. And yet it makes it so much better because he is. And I think the effects as well are so great because of Nighy's ability to give them great capture. He did motion capture for this film. He gave a lot of the reference for the CGI so that he has this beautiful combination of villainous and tragic heartbreak. That I mean it genuinely when I think that this is a tragic film. And I understand that, I was a boy in the 2000s, so maybe these movies mean a little bit more to me than other people. But while I'm a fan of, let's say, the Transformers franchise and Michael Bay movies in general, I kind of understand and recognize their flaws. But with this movie, I don't think that the same way. I do think that this is a genuinely, even from a 2026 perspective, masterful film, masterful excellence of action filmmaking, and a deeply moving performance at its center, at least in the supporting perspective, from Bill Nighy. So he captures that villain aspect. There is a sense of scariness to him, obviously, because of his kind of scary look. But the way he lowers his voice and walks around things and sometimes spaces pauses between his lines adds to the sense of villainy. But then also, when we see the tragic elements of him, you see almost the person underneath all of those tentacles. Just sometimes the way he drops his face and lowers his cheekbones very uniquely kind of shows vulnerability. So there are certain moments within the film that he's surprised and doesn't realize that certain characters have certain information about him, and you see this kind of puppy dog vulnerability, scared nature, like I said, by lowering those cheekbones, by kind of being a little bit sheepish with some of his movements. It is a kind of a interesting combination where throughout all this CGI, which his face is almost entirely recreated in CGI, he's still able to communicate genuine heartbreak, genuine kind of vulnerability, while also being kind of villainous and scary, and have that kind of still piratey voice. Very interesting as well, because the first movie, Jeffrey Rush does the kind of standard, classic, evil pirate kind of a performance. So as a sequel, it would have been difficult, I think, for Bill to do something different and make the villain his own. And he does that and has a little bit more of an odder energy to it and a little bit more unpredictable energy to it. And lowering his voice and while also keeping some of that tragic humanity to it gives the movie an extra layer that it doesn't necessarily need and ends up being, in my opinion, one of the scariest and heartbreaking villain performances of all time. But did the Academy make the right choice? I'm going to say, I guess, sort of, yeah. Alan Arkin, at the end of the day, is, unfortunately passed away. So he doesn't have a chance to win an Oscar, in which Mark Wahlberg, at the time of this recording, is still alive and has potentially some chances to win an Oscar, or a supporting acting Oscar. I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up winning one, let's say, in 20 years' time. But even still, I did mention it, that I think of these performances, Mark Wahlberg is just my personal favorite. And in particular, in the history of the Oscars, you could say, okay, well, if Arkin doesn't win here, maybe he wins again for Argo in 2012. Like, there was another few opportunities for him as a performer. And he is very good in The Little Miss Sunshine. And I know people like that movie, so I don't want to necessarily take it away from him and say the Academy got it wrong. In particular, just because I know Mark Wahlberg hasn't had the career maybe that if he won the Oscar in 2006 would have expected. So it is a weird scenario where my personal preference is Mark Wahlberg, but I also kind of recognize from a historical perspective that the Alan Arkin win isn't that bad, and it is a totally fine, solid win from a movie that I know still a lot of people like, even though it's a little bit, indicative of its era and of its time. But that's about it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you comment below. Let me know your thoughts on this year and the supporting acting category, maybe The Departed or the Pirates of the Caribbean films. I'd love to hear that in the comments down below. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.